I'm David Goralnik from the ICLW conference in Kaleidoscope Learning, and I'm here with Fernando Salvetti from eReal. And Fernando is a pioneer in the world of virtual reality and mixed media and so many other related worlds, and has done some fascinating work that's useful in education and beyond in mixing technology with the way that people interact. And I'm just delighted to have Fernando here with me today. So Fernando, if we can start, tell me just a little bit about, and for our audience, just a little bit about your work and your product and what you're doing. We can see a little bit in the background as we speak, but I'd love to hear more about it.
Yes, in my background, you can take a look at eReal, that is an enhanced reality environment, sort of mixed reality or hybrid reality, where people may interact with virtual objects as well as with real human beings in real time, both online, remotely, and face-to-face, interacting thanks to proximity sensors that are enabling the tactile interaction. So we are looking at big touch screens, as well as with the gaze or with body gesture. So we can enable sometimes the interaction with virtual objects, swiping or using our hands very far from the wall as well as online. At the same time, we can really touch common walls, level 4, level 5 finished wall. And we can pop up images, avatars, content, 2D, 3D contents, to interact with, to learn from, to share, mainly to co-build knowledge and a common understanding, because at the end we are educators.
Great. Well, this is a fantastic system. Can you tell me a little bit about what the eReal system, how it runs? So how does the whole setup work to run these? So you're running simulations, and you can touch, and you can speak, and you can interact with real and virtual characters. So how does this work kind of from the standpoint of technology? It's not going to completely run on my laptop, but what do you need to make it run?
It's very easy. A small mid-tower server designed and assembled by us, one or more ultra short throw projectors when we install within a room, or touch screens when we work remotely, or third option, walls embedded with sensors in order to track fingers and human gestures. So sometimes we put jointly together to work within the same virtual classroom, people from 3 or 4 different locations, because they are co-building the same virtual objects. So is online work, and first of all is a face-to-face setting, like a cave, the computer-assisted virtual environment, but less expensive, and first of all, very easy compared with the traditional cave environments. Because we are educators, not IT guys, we have to keep a very simple and user-friendly the experience. So computer, projector, sensor, and a lot of instructional design behind, because this is our job.
Exactly. Okay, so that sounds great. So that sort of the less expensive, the simpler version is primarily projectors, and then the sort of higher end versions you add the walls and the touch sensors.
Yeah.
That come accurate. Great. Can you give us some? I know you've had some examples in the medical field and some others where you've put this simulation idea into practice. Can you give us a story or two about a simulation that you've rolled out and what it did and how it worked?
Yeah. For instance, in Boston, within the Harvard Center for Medical Simulation, known worldwide as a CMS, Center for Medical Simulation as an acronym, we are performing labor and delivery programs, as well as we are interacting vocally with surgical checklist and mnemonics in order to perform a simulation in a high fidelity environment, where people, learners, are also surrounded by indoor, sometimes outdoor scenarios. So they have to deal with unexpected situations. They have to face unexpected tasks. They have to try to understand what is happening behind their shoulders. And sometimes they have to face very, very challenging situation. And this is an example. Another is in Ashburn, in Virginia, approximately 30 miles from DC downtown, the George Washington University, the School of Nursing. Again, they are immersing nurses and paramedic learners in order to face a mass triage or other very medical relevant situations within a high fidelity simulation environment. In our opinion, very better than the traditional work around the dummy, the plastic, the patient simulator, because enough a patient simulator, alone a patient simulator is not enough. Other samples from Europe, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, not only in the medical field, also in management and leadership development. For instance, we designed a Leadership 5.0 program under the umbrella of the World Economic Forum and on behalf of the Corporate University of Eni, the Italian oil and gas company, in partnership with Aramco from Saudi Arabia and other three energy big corporations, in order to deliver, or better, to foster a digital mindset for young leaders, people aged less than 40, in need to perform within a business game, just to learn how to launch cryptocurrency, in order to explore by the flick of their hands infographics made interactive, just to really explore what looks like a car in 2050, or what looks like a plant in 2050, in order to have them really living, let's say, a memorable experience related to fostering their digital mindset outside a traditional classroom. Then we bridge modules using a platform, online learning, and sometimes we deliver in regular classrooms. But in our opinion, immersing people within experiential labs has something that a traditional classroom cannot deliver in the same way.
Can you talk a little bit about the process of designing this kind of system from an educational standpoint, which, as you mentioned before, is absolutely critical. It's one thing to have the technology, and even if it's technology meant for learning by doing, but what are you going to do about it? How do you put people in the right situations that they learn what they need to be able to do in the right way? So can you talk a little bit about how your processes work and how you look at it from an educational design standpoint?
Yes, need analysis and user centricity as main guidelines means talking to the expected final users, building something like a short movie. So starting by writing a scenario, trying to share with them what makes the difference in between a good performance and something that is an average or below the average level performance, in order to try to reach educational and development targets, keeping the final user at the center of the stage. So from the very beginning, we are used to interview the client. The rule is ask questions 70% of your time, provide info not more than 30% of your time. So we very quickly provide a few sentences in order to allow people to figure out what they are expected to live within a real environment. Then we start asking questions about their average daily life or their specific topics or challenges we are working around. And we design step by step, trying to embed their emotion, the final expected scenario. So the approach is Stanford-based. At Stanford, they are very smart with design thinking. And design thinking try to start from emotion, try to put the designer within the same shoes or to look through the same glasses, like if the designers were the clients. So our instructional design is mainly performing design thinking approach with a strong user centricity. So it's not so different compared with other design processes or approaches.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so you're balancing both the, from your design thinking perspective, the needs of the audience with which is obviously the primary goal, but then with what you're getting from the subject matter experts in terms of what people need to be able to do. And I imagine that's a challenge to make sure that they help you understand what people need to do and not just what people need to know, which are not exactly the same thing.
Are not at all the same things. You are totally right. And what the people are expected to do sometimes is challenging to figure out. Usually, let's say, low defense interviews within a friendly setting, making clear people that we are not assessors, we are not trying to evaluate their performance, but we are educators, we are trainers. We are only trying to design a short movie. We are only trying to recreate a very rich and high fidelity environment where to perform as they were in a traditional and regular classroom, not within an assessment center. This is the main barrier, and this is a big challenge. Usually people start with a defensive approach, and usually they try to show and to share their knowledge. You must do this and that. This is not the answer we are looking for. We are trying to lower the psychological barrier. We are trying to build a psychologically safe and sound environment, let's say. We try to introduce ourselves and we try to perform in order to really convince our clients that we are not assessors. We are trainers, and we guarantee privacy because we do not report nothing about the performance to the internal hierarchy or to the bosses. Usually after 20 minutes, 30 minutes from the beginning of an interview, we can really talk about not the smoke, but the meat, the real situations, the real challenges, what they should do, but it's not so easy being able to perform. And then we try to recreate like if our clients and learners were within a movie, short movies or short interactive and immersive labs. This is the vision behind Irial.
Oh, that's great. And as your process progresses, so this is probably for your clients, or at least most of your clients, can be a fairly new kind of activity, right? I mean, even when I learn by doing simulations on a computer, it's still a new activity to a lot of people in the sort of depth that we go in the way that you're talking about, getting to sort of what are the misconceptions, getting a very honest view of what people need to do and what they shouldn't do, and what practically might happen, and that the world is not perfect and people don't always do things perfectly, and that's how it's going to be, and that's how you learn. So as you progress through the process, what's the next, once you've had your initial interviews, when do you get to a point where you show people something, where you show something to a client or an audience, and what is that thing as you're sort of progressing from initial concept, but not quite, not at the point where you're building something for real yet?
At the beginning, we show a story. So we really show something like a written small movie. Then when we are ready to stamp, usually we perform ground zero. So the starting point in terms of performance. And in the middle and at the end of the experience, it depends on the length of the experience, but usually there are two milestones, middle and end. We measure behavioral outputs. So at the end, we as education or teaching team are able to track progresses or lack of progresses from the ground zero the first milestone, the second and final milestone. Usually we provide people one by one with a very direct feedback about what they performed. And we provide the client only with a short summary. The client is the company or the organization behind, because there is privacy, because our policy is a closed door policy within an area lab, as well as within a regular training classroom. So people know that with us they can perform freely in order to really hone their own skill and competencies, in order to reach their own results as individual people or persons, better, or as a team, or and, because, for instance, in Boston, sometimes we have a single person performing dialogically with an avatar that is talking from a wall. Other times, the avatar is talking from a screen. It is purely e-learning. In our case, it's more interactive because we design all our content using Unity as a graphic engine, and our effort is making a really highly interactive all the content, both delivered online or face-to-face within a real immersive environment. So at the end, and at least, people may really measure ground zero and further milestones reached in terms of performance, behavioral competencies, technical competencies, all joined, all related, because the effort is recreating a high fidelity environment. And in the real world, we do not perform the so-called soft skills and the so-called technical skills. We perform highly sophisticated behaviors, professional behaviors. We try to take screenshots and photographs about real behaviors that have different and several components: technical, behavioral, cognitive, metacognitive. And we try to provide feedback, enabling people to understand all those aspects that are from the same performance, stage by stage, from grade zero to the end of the real experience. For the commitment, for the client, for the corporations, the organization we are working with, we provide only short, very short summaries with the average trend of the teams that perform, not about individual people, because we are trainers and educators, and mainly in Western Europe, has to be guaranteed privacy. Sometimes in the US or in other countries, there is a melt in between training and evaluation. Usually it's not the same in Western Europe.
Interesting. Yeah, no, we do have in the US, there's certainly a strong interest in analytics and data and how people are performing. And often I've certainly seen in companies I've consulted to that's overwhelming in a way that's not really conducive to better performance. And I very much appreciate philosophically your view of let people perform let people try things out, let people experiment, let people work creatively and freely. They're not being analyzed and evaluated, certainly at the time that they're training. And that's really how you're going to learn, both cognitively and emotionally, which is terrific. Just one more question about the educational model on this. When you're in the middle of an experience, what kind of coaching might be available? So we've talked a little bit about feedback, but is there some kind of coaching and guidance if you're operating on a patient in a simulation in your world and you're not sure what to do next? Are there things that you can do besides try it out to get a little bit of a sense of what you might want to consider doing next?
Sometimes, like with the movie, we stop and then we restore to the scene, providing for a few seconds, 30, 40 seconds, 1 minute, individual coaching and guidance to people. Other times, we stop only at the end and we start a more traditional debriefing in order to provide feedback from the trainer or the trainers. Sometimes we have 2 trainers or 3 different trainers attending and looking at the same scene. mainly in healthcare simulation. In management, usually we have one trainer, at least two. And 70% of cases, we provide feedback, coaching, and behavioral guidance only at the end. In approximately 30% of cases, we stop the scene and we restart after having provided people a real-time short guidance or a couple of tips that, in our opinion, may make the difference. And only when the trainer is deciding that is better stopping than not. So is under the trainer responsibility taking this decision. We, from the control room, we cannot, even if we are usually in a direct dialogue with the trainer via earphones, we usually cannot take this decision. We leave the trainer deciding if it's worthy or not, stopping, providing specific guidelines, specific tips, specific advice or not. It's really delicate and sometimes is highly disputed if stopping or not a simulation.
Absolutely, it's I think an issue with any kind of certainly any kind of learn by doing training. When do you intervene versus when do you let them continue to experiment, recover from their own mistakes, learn on their own? So in the standard use case at this point, with what you're doing, there are just so many things you could do with this simulation technology. Generally, people are using, just to clarify, using the simulation as, and this is with the technology, and then the coaching guidance comes from a person.
Yeah, the technology is behind, is over the scene, but it's like it were behind the scene. People forget in a few minutes that there is a technology behind, because usually they fall in love, or at least they are totally engaged with the scene itself, with the scenario, the ongoing scenario. Because if you are part of a movie, if you are performing like a character, and if you are immersed within a real life scene, usually you forget that there is a technology behind. You perform.
No, absolutely, and that's the goal, right? When you do that, you've done it really well, right? That means you've got people fully immersed in the educational experience. They're not paying it. They're unaware essentially that there's anything else going on, which is great. Which leads really to my next question, which is, can you talk a little bit about how this might affect society more broadly? Like we've kind of talked within the scope of education so far, but more broadly, this is technology and a philosophy that really affects society in a much more general way. So can you speak to that maybe a little bit?
We are assuming that the museums, and generally speaking, schools, colleges, universities, not only corporations or other big public organizations, may benefit of those type of technologies. At the end, we are talking about hybrid or mixed reality. What makes very specific this technology compared with others is that you can interact with virtual objects, avoiding special glasses, gloves, or joysticks. So it's pretty a natural feeling that you can experience once you are interacting with the avatars or the virtual 3D objects like a beating heart or like a mechanical piece from an engine, for instance. We are experimenting something about ancient Egypt within a museum, mainly to teach or to have young learners progressing with hieroglyphic, ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic. We are experimenting communication cascading about disease like diabetes for common people within some Middle Eastern smart towns within the Arab Emirates mainly, because they are in need to cascading communication, relevant public communication about key topics very relevant to the average population. In our opinion, mainly with the young generations, the so-called digital natives, sometimes they are not so digital. They have to learn to interact. Sometimes old and very aged people, in my experience, are more digitalized than the so-called digital natives. But for sure, the young people are usually open to visual thinking. So what we are figuring out, sometimes we try to collect data and to write articles and researches about this, is that we are honing, fostering a little bit visual thinking, and at the same time, we are experiencing that we are allowing people to perform multiple identities. It's not psychiatry. We are not talking about psychiatry or pathology, but we are allowing people to perform really like they were actors, and they may try to be themselves in many different ways. Let's say this way, more than in a traditional classroom, more than when they are engaged within a traditional simulation. I'm a trainer since 1996. I'm used to perform a lot of traditional simulations, role playings. It's different performing a game, a role play, being briefed by a paper, a piece of paper, or being delivered with guidelines provided by an avatar from a wall, or directly being immersed in an ongoing scenario. It makes a little bit easier changing my own identity, performing, trying to perform such a way or such another. In a very easy way, we deliver a lot of programs about public speaking. And our first results are highlighting that people within a real setting are more open to try themselves answering questions in different ways compared with the approach they are usually following in a traditional classroom. Our hypothesis is that the multimedia environment where they are embedded is allowing a little bit to feel themselves as multiple identities or multiple players, role players, even if they are an only and unique persons. Those are only first hypothesis. It's not easy collecting data because we are performing a dozen of real labs in between Western Europe and the US, but 12, 13 are not so much labs. So we are at the beginning of our process of collecting data and building hypotheses about how people are feeling themselves and how people are performing within the real classroom or the real setting.
Well, that sounds great. And one of the nice things I think you just brought up is the idea that not only can you practice, through learning by doing, as we've discussed, but that you can try on sort of a, in some environments you can try on a different persona. You can try to be somebody that's a little different than your normal personality in a free environment, in a safe environment. It's simulated, it's free, and you can experiment. And I think that's that's a great thing, and a great part of any educational experience. As we're just about to wrap up, is there anything you kind of want to leave us with in terms of the way that you see technology impacting society and education, looking forward, where we might want to see things going in the next few years? As now you can build these fantastic things in a room. What else do you see kind of moving forward, and maybe just a couple minutes on where you see this, where you see things going?
First of all, I'm a philosopher and a lawyer and not an engineer. So I'm not an expert about technology. I'm just performing as a system integrator. What we are foresee, and we means our extended team, 25 people behind the real, is the Internet of Everything. So it's a common trend within the so-called 4.0 society. In our educational setting means embedding sensors within different things, having sensorized objects as well as having sensorized people, people wearing special clothes embedded with sensors, people wearing special helmets embedded with sensors. And this means in the next 5-10 years, the high chance, let's say, to measure or at least to track gaze, eyes, bodies, human interaction, human positioning around a physical setting, situation, challenging task in a way that we are not used to do within a traditional educational setting. If you think yourself as a trainer within a traditional learning setting, your attention is mainly focused on people, mainly on the verbal performance, sometimes the facial, not verbal performance, a few times the physical setting, where people are positioning themselves, furniture inside, obstacle inside, and so on. Because our cognitive resources are limited. With the Internet of Everything, we are expected to be able to track environments and people. So we are expected to perform pretty easily network analysis, having a deeper or at least a better understanding about how people are positioning themselves. Think a teamwork. How I'm positioning myself physically with the other 2, 3, 4 teammates. How we are positioning ourselves with the patient if we are talking of a healthcare simulation. This is a trend we are foreseeing. Then let's wait and see. Who knows?
Right. No, you never know, but it sounds very, very promising, and both in terms of understanding interactions with people and understanding interactions with objects and smart objects that are part of the Internet of Things. So there's just so much that we can do as we continue to reimagine the world of education and bring about change. And it's really just the time to do it. And really pleased to see where you were going and where your work is going and headed. And it's really, really interesting work to discuss. Fernando, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. As always, it's been Fernando Salvetti from IRIAL in Italy and numerous other countries, really around the world. I think, what are you in 80 countries? Is that actually the right number? 83 countries around the world. And it's really interesting technology. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks once again, Fernando.
My pleasure, David. Thank you so much for the time you devoted me. All the best.